Grateful or hateful? Which will it be? Which is it? Which has it been? Are you a person who traditionally is grateful? Or are you a little hateful? Let me read two verses of Scripture. One about being grateful and one about being hateful. The grateful one comes from the book of Genesis. But Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people." And then in Paul's letter to the "For though they knew God, they did not honor him as God, or give thanks to him. But they became futile in their thinking, and their senseless minds were darkened." It is that darkness of the mind that sometimes makes us hateful. There was a family in Texas in the 50s. The man retired at 40. That's a pretty good deal, isn't it? He had just planned everything and managed everything, and at 40 he retired and he bought 3,000 acres of rich delta land along the Brazos River. He bought that land where Stephen F. Austin and the original 300 settlers came into Texas. He went into the cattle business. He had a lake. He stocked it with fish. He had a place to duck hunt. He built a hunting lodge to entertain guests who would come to see him. He had alligators in addition to cattle. He had squirrels and quail and deer. It was beautiful. 3,000 acres, developed, protected. Beautiful new home he built. Had a wife and 2 kids. And in the mid-50s, something happened in certain parts of Texas. There was a drought. I don't know if we noticed it around here like they noticed it evidently along the Brazos Delta, but it lasted 4 years. It didn't rain. And at the end of 4 years, this family realized that they were now on the edge. They were about to lose everything, unless it rained. The lake had dried up. The hunting was no good. The rice fields that he had also were dry. And then in 1956, it started to rain. And it rained. Like the floods in Noah's time. And the river filled up and overflowed into the lake. And the lake filled up and the levees broke and swept away the hunting lodge and all the barns that he had. His son came home from college, and by midnight they were stacking Chippendale furniture in the hallway. And a little after midnight, water had risen and was coming through the windows of the house. Everything outside swept away completely. And they realized that they just had a little while to get out, and they had 2 skiffs, 2 little rowboats. And they put the silver and the china, and they had a couple of paintings worth about $100,000. Piled those paintings in one of the boats. And they got out headed for the one piece of dry ground that they could see by dawn. And they got close to the highway, and there was a speedboat full of sightseers that came by, and when they came by, they swamped the boat that had the paintings and the china and the silver in it. And out it went. And they got to a place where they could stand in the mud and the water up to their waist. And this boy said his mother looked at the last thing she had go out of the boat. And the other boat started to turn around and come back and help. And about that time, he said his dad reached for the shotgun. And they turned around and went the other way. And he said his mother stood out and started to sob. And she cried, and she cried, and she cried, and he said, my dad only knew one song. There's no place like home. And he started singing, There's no place like home. And he sang, and the louder he sang, the louder she cried. And she sobbed louder than he could sing. And he said, the two of us stood there and thought, they have both lost their minds completely. This has done them in. And he said, finally, my dad stopped singing and said, woman, all it was stuff. That's all. It was just stuff. And okay, we've lost all the stuff. We didn't even have any stuff when we got married. He said, we had our clothes and a quarter, and you made me give the quarter to the preacher. And he said, let me tell you, it's stuff, and that's all it was, and that's all we've lost. But he said she just kept crying, and she just kept sobbing. And he got her by the shoulders, and he said, woman, listen to me. We've still got our family, and we've still got our wits. And I'm gladder for what I had than I am madder for what I've lost. I'm gladder for what I've had than madder for what I've lost. Grateful or hateful? Which way does it turn us? And which way does it go? You know, we think sometimes, and we in the church tell you, God's real interested in what you do with your money. You know, I think we're a whole lot more interested than he is. I'm not sure he's interested. I'm not sure he cares a whit. I tell you what I think he does care about, your whole attitude about life and living. That's what he cares about. That's what he's interested in. That's what makes the difference. Being gladder that you had it, no matter what it was, than madder that you lost it. And it can be big and it can be little. And it can have the same effect on your attitude of being grateful or hateful. A minister lost his 12-year-old daughter to leukemia. And he said people came and talked to him, and like he had talked to them, you know. Oh, time will heal it. And he said he didn't even want to hear that time would heal it. At that point, he wasn't sure it would heal it, at that point. And he said people came and told him things they had been through, just like he had told people things that other folks had been through. And somebody came and said, oh, I went through this when I lost my Henry. And he said, I didn't want to hear about losing Henry. And said one preacher came and told him one thing that helped him a little bit. He said, Carl, one of these days God's got some explaining to do, and he'll probably do it. And one of these days you'll know about this kind of thing. But he said the only thing that really helped him was somebody said to him, all of life is just simply a loan, none of it's yours. She wasn't yours. She was God's. Life is not yours, not any of it. It's just a loan. It's just a gift. All of it is. That's all. And when we lose pieces of it, are we more grateful that we had it, or just mad and hateful that we lost it? Did you happen to see the TV special night before last about heart transplant for infants? I didn't know they did heart transplants on infants. And I don't like to see surgical procedures. I don't want to know what's in here. I don't want to know how it works. I just hope it works. I don't want to see it. You know. But they showed the transplant of that little bitty heart, and I watched it. And it wasn't all. They put it in that infant's chest, and in a minute it started to work. And the doctor, talking to the reporter, had tears in his eyes and said, it's a miracle every time I see it. It's a miracle. And then they met with the family who gave their baby's heart. And what it must have taken. But you see, they put something into life. And it was not just being hateful for what they had lost, but a willingness to give